In 2005, Teen Titans aired its 4th season. Just like last season, in this video, I'll review each episode, give them a score, and then talk about the season in general at the end. Also, spoilers for the entire season. Without any further ado, every episode of Teen Titans Season 4 reviewed. Episode 1, Episode 257494. When Control Freak transports himself into the television, the Titans must follow him through 500 channels of danger. Where episodes like Mad Mod and Bunny Raven showed how the formula of trapping the Titans in a wacky environment can be fantastic, this episode truly perfected it. The beginning sequence doesn't do much more than set up the episode, although some of the visual jokes are fairly comical. Once the Titans get into the TV, however, the episode becomes fantastic. Each scene is jam-packed with jokes and references, and while this episode came out 15 years ago, some of the references are a bit dated, but most of them are still easy to catch, and the jokes more than make up for it. This episode is so split up into scenes that it's kind of hard to review as a whole, so I'll quickly go over some of my favorite jokes here. First, the Roadrunner bit is short, but a fantastic reference that's hard to miss. The Dr. Seuss part is great too. The way they combine Starfire's way of kind of alien speech and manage to still have a Dr. Seuss type of rhyme is fantastic. But the best has to be the Zenthos commercial. The way it just hits with joke after joke, all while a comically simple fight happens in the background, is impeccable. Even though I only mentioned these 3, there are dozens of references and jokes in this episode that all add to a fantastically clever version of this type of plot. Of course, all of this is just added to by how great Control Freak is. His jokes are clever, his fights are great, he just greatly adds to the episode in a way that's only matched by Mumbo and Mad Mod. All of this culminates into one final reference to Star Wars. They went all out with their references here, and although the fight at the very end was a bit short and lackluster, the finishing spell by Beast Boy ends the episode with yet another great joke. One thing these episodes often struggle with is the ending. It's hard to end such a nonsensical episode, yet here they nail it with one final reference and a laugh track. Honestly, even with the great nonsensical episodes of the past, this one easily takes the cake for the best. It has the best jokes, best references, decent fights, and a great villain. Often my scores lead to more serious episodes, being the only ones that can get high scores, but here, this episode stands as one of the best, even in a season often considered the peak of the series. Episode 2, Cyborg the Barbarian. Cyborg is transported into the past. This is actually the second episode to revolve around time travel, the other being How Long Is Forever. Unfortunately, this one fails to live up to the greatness of the first one. To start, besides some fantastic music, the intro does very little at all besides kind of vaguely set up the theme of the episode, being that future isn't inherently better. Or I should say one of, because there are so many themes. They just keep adding new themes almost every scene. The most interesting, but unfortunately least talked of these themes, is the idea that Cyborg wears his armor all the time. Unlike most teen hero shows, the Titans are always in hero mode, and I wish they had done more with that about how it personally affects the Titans, but since this was a Cyborg episode, it would have been kind of hard to have that type of plot. Anyway, the opening fight is a bit boring, but it leads pretty well into Crawl and the Witch, where we see yet another theme, being Be Careful What You Wish For. This has been done 1,000 times, and they do nothing creative with it here. Cyborg and Sarasim are just not that interesting, and they try to fit an entire romantic arc into one episode, and it doesn't have nearly the emotional payoff they were hoping for. Instead, it's just a quick scene placed in between mediocre fights. While seeing a completely different type of fight was cool, it just consists of basic sword and punch shots. I would argue that there isn't a single great fight in this episode. They're all pretty short and just quickly end. The ending, too, has to be one of the most anticlimactic things possible. I don't know if this was them trying to quickly fit in one more theme of sometimes things end without a conclusion, but seeing things in a book later is so much worse than just seeing the actual fight. While this episode is fairly weak, the change of pace and great music is enough to keep it from being terrible. Episode 3, Birthmark. The Titans try to figure out why Raven despises her birthday while Slade mysteriously returns from the dead. This season, just like season 2, has 5 arc episodes, and it starts at episode 3. And unlike the episode Terra, this episode is fantastic. The opening fight is really nothing that special. It's super short and has better jokes than actual fighting shots. But of course, the first fight doesn't matter terribly much, and the immediate reveal of Slade's return marks the true beginning of the episode. I do think it would have been better to have Slade's reveal to the audience comes at the same time to the Titans, although his reveal earlier in the episode does lead to a kind of suspense throughout. Anyway, Raven going completely off on her friends just trying to help her is nothing new, but here it feels especially bad as both parties truly believe they're doing the right thing. Robin bringing up the events of Haunted in order to show his connection to Raven was cool to see, and the first vision that Raven has is truly haunting. The season wastes no time getting dark as the beautiful backgrounds and the excellent voice acting of Trigon make an excellent scene. The following part is incredible too. The actual reveal of Slade lives up to all and any expectations. The way that the Titans cease being their usual joking selves and are just completely terrified is such a complete shift from the first fight with Dr. Light. The fight itself isn't as much of a fight as it is a showcase of Slade's new powers. Eventually, Raven freezes time and decides only to free Robin. Robin's involvement from this point on is a bit underwhelming, although it does serve a point in showing just how useless everyone is against the new Slade. This leads to a fantastic chase scene through the city where Slade just tanks everything Raven throws at him. Slade catches up to her in a chilling scene where he forces her to view a vision of the future, one where she's doomed the earth and killed her friends. The vision ends with Raven screaming and Slade getting exactly what he wants. The ending is hopeful but not optimistic. From the fantastic reveals, the great fight scenes, a few good jokes at the beginning, and incredible environments, atmosphere, and mood, this episode is truly an incredible beginning to the arc, one that sets it up well while also being a great episode on its own. Episode 4, The Quest. After failing to beat a skilled martial artist criminal, Robin goes on a quest to find the true master to improve his skills. A Robin episode with no involvement of Slade is rare, so it's nice to see him on an unrelated quest. The beginning fight has no context at all, and therefore isn't fantastic or anything, but for what it is, it's okay. Robin leaving his team for a while is not very characteristic for him, but it's not too far-fetched to be unwatchable or anything. From the moment that Robin first talks to the old lady, it's obvious that she's the master, but they barely try to make it a surprise at the end. Seeing Robin fight without any weapons is a neat idea, but you don't really actually get to see it. Instead, all 4 fights after the initial one are gimmick fights based around one thing. The fight against the bear is short and barely has anything to it. Robin just waits around and then throws him in the lake. Generally, in between these battles are 2 things, the first of which are the Titans dressing up like Robin in Jump City. This joke is fine, but it is a bit weird for Star and especially Raven to do it, but it does make for a nice change of pace in the episode. On the other hand are Robin's interactions with the old lady, which are funny and a bit pretentious at times, but generally add to the episode. The second fight against the snake isn't really a fight, more just an opportunity for Robin to learn something. Finally, I found the fight against the monkey to easily be the best of the episode. Just seeing Robin jump around and take jabs at the monkey, all leading up to him whacking him in the face with a pole, makes the entire fight really fun to watch. The fight against Katero at the end was really just there to prove the episode's point, although the idea of using what you've learned to win at the end, while painfully obvious, is fairly well done here. The ending is nice too, with Robin getting to learn with the true master, and I found him not being upset at his friends for messing with his stuff, ending the episode on a happy note to be better than the alternative. While this episode certainly isn't anything groundbreaking or anything, and I've criticized it a bunch, it truly feels like a movie at times. It's hard to explain, but it manages to disconnect itself from the main show enough to create a pretty decent standalone story. While boring at times, this episode has some incredible shots, and the end product is a unique but great episode. Episode 5, Employee of the Month. Beast Boy wants a moped but can't afford one, so he gets a job at a fast food restaurant and stumbles onto an alien plot. This episode revolves around solving a problem that is made up just for this episode. Beast Boy had to be shown getting tired for the first time, Cyborg had to be holding onto the alien ship, and Robin had to have just gotten a new device for this episode that allows him to fly. Fortunately, as if the kidnapping cows plot didn't clue you in, this episode doesn't really depend on the rules of the series to tell the story. Instead, it feels like almost a completely different show. The explanation on why Robin couldn't just use the Titans Fund to get Beast Boy a moped or a different form of transportation is pretty much non-existent, but the montage of him trying out different jobs is actually pretty funny for what it is. The scene with all the Titans at the diner, however, is definitely my favorite from the episode. Beast Boy just describing everything as a trade secret is a simple but well executed gag. While the Titans chasing the UFO looks great and is actually pretty solid for how short it is, Beast Boy discovering Nufu is a bit underwhelming. The source is definitely the worst part of the episode. He isn't funny and just drags the episode at times. The interrogation is also just a bit too weird for my liking. Beast Boy on the moped procrastinating is actually kind of enjoyable though. Just seeing him use the water gun does get a bit boring at times, but the payoff was there with there just being an off switch was pretty satisfying. I don't get why the moped had to explode at the end, I guess just to return things to the status quo, but Robin still got to keep his new glider. In general, this episode isn't action-packed, doesn't have some kind of smart message or anything. It does exactly what it sets out to do. Wacky comedy. This episode certainly stands out in the generally darker and more serious season 4. Often, Beast Boy episodes that try to be less serious end up being some of the worst in the series, but here, this episode is actually decent. Episode 6, Troc. The Titans team up with an alien hero to fight against a mechanical menace, but fail to notice his prejudice towards Starfire. This episode is surprisingly straightforward in its themes. Despite the alien background, the episode is truly about prejudice. But more about that later, because this initial fight is actually pretty good if not a bit short. Val-Yor is a very interesting character. They write him as a cool space warrior, so it makes complete sense that until directly told to them, they can completely ignore his racism towards Tamaranians. One incredibly weird part about this episode is that it actually has Starfire mess up multiple times. While Val-Yor is still entirely in the wrong, it likely would have been easier to convey that if he was angry at Star for no reason. The fight on the ship wasn't great either, an incredibly typical fight for the Titans, even despite the unique enemies and locations. This is where Val-Yor begins to really be racist towards Star, as he begins to use the word Troc. Star uses what I guess is kind of wordplay to tell Cyborg what Troc means, while very purposely making Cyborg unaware of the true meaning, and it's incredibly weird. Even weirder is her getting seemingly upset at Cyborg when he uses it after she tells him it means nothing. For an episode that's already incredibly unsubtle, I also don't get why they had to have Cyborg say that he understands what Starfire is going through because he's part robot. Had they just cut him off at, "Of course I do," they likely could have saved this serious moment from becoming a bit of a joke. I'm glad that Robin immediately takes her side and agrees to call him out on it even before they complete the mission. Not telling Raven and Beast Boy until after the fact was a bit strange though. Again, another fairly typical fight towards the end. While I feel like having Val-Yor beg for his life from a Tamaranian would have been better than what we got, it serves its purpose anyway. The ending is easily my favorite part though. This episode could have so easily had Val-Yor change his way, but instead it sticks to the theme of sometimes people will be rude towards you because of how you look, and there's truly nothing you can do about it. I wish this episode had nailed its theme better throughout the episode, but at the end, even if it is a bit cliche, they truly nail it. Even with the fantastic theme and writing, the action falls short, leaving this episode in a weird place. While definitely a great anti-racism episode, the Teen Titans episode, it's fairly average. Episode 7, The Prophecy. Slade returns and forces Raven to admit her role in the upcoming apocalypse to her friends. Unlike Birthmark, which eases you into the darkness, this episode immediately starts with Robin once again being obsessed with Slade. Bringing back Slade and Raven's story kind of leaves Robin in a tough spot, but they give Slade and Robin enough moments into the season to make up for it. The fight with Slade again isn't much of a fight, but instead a segue into the library. While Raven leaving so soon is a bit of a letdown, she kinda needed to go to Azarath, and it was likely best for the Titans to learn about Raven's destiny while she wasn't there. Speaking of which, the only subpar part of this episode is the staircase scene. There isn't a fight or any new information being presented, so it's practically useless for the overall episode. However, this is more than made up with by Raven's conversation with her mother. While they kinda dance around outright saying it, when we learn that while Raven's been off being a Teen Titan, her entire city and mother have been destroyed by Trigon. The way that even her own mother tells her that all hope is lost truly showcases why Raven has lost all hope herself. Back to the Titans, while their fight with Slade is fairly average, although with some great dialogue between Robin and Slade, once Raven gets there, the scene becomes one of my favorite in the series. Raven pulling Slade back up from the ground just to beat him up is honestly one of the sickest scenes in the show. Slade tries to turn it around on her by saying that her friends are scared of her or whatever, but I'm glad that they let that incredibly well choreographed thrashing stand on its own. Unlike every other time where the sunrise comes with bright music and hope, they keep the dreary music going going and immediately transition to Slade after Raven tells her friends her connection to Trigon. If there was one thing about this episode that I'm not a huge fan of, it's the continuance of the trend of Raven leaving her friends in the dark, but this episode is still fantastic. Some great action scenes and incredible dialogue. This episode is a fantastic one on its own and sets up the finale in a great way. Now we just have to get through 3 subpar episodes to get there. Episode 8. Stranded. The Titans go to a space station and get attacked by a monster. Nearly every problem in this episode is caused by a misunderstanding, which is already not a great plot device. Even further, past the first fight of the episode, there is little to no action moving forward. While this combination of things sounds like it would make a really terrible episode, this episode really isn't complete garbage. Don't get me wrong, it's not good or even average, but despite the first fight being a bit short and the villain having 0 interesting traits, the episode truly starts to pick up once we land on the planet. Raven's plot is the shortest, but for just using about a minute of airtime to give the 5th Titan something to do, it's fine. Beast Boy and Cyborg's plot, on the other hand, is easily the worst of the 3. They immediately use the joke of Beast Boy doesn't understand technology terms, and they continue to only use that joke and nothing else over and over and over again for a large portion of this episode. They also very heavily attempt to use visual humor, but it just ends up being confusing what's actually happening and what's an attempt at a joke. But the main part of the episode is Star and Robin, and the quality of that segment definitely fluctuates. The first part visually is stunning. First, Starfire saving Robin while he's wrestling with the alien slug is incredibly cool, if not a bit random. And then the way they show them jumping around while Robin tries to talk to her is fantastic. They move from camera angle to camera angle, all with incredible backgrounds that make the scene look great. What they're actually saying, however, is fine. It's obviously not an incredible emotional scene or anything, but it's not terrible. The scene in the cave is much better when it comes to dialogue, even if it does look a lot worse. They write them coming back together surprisingly well, and it doesn't feel incredibly rushed despite how truly quick it is. The fight is incredibly short and barely a fight. Defeating the creature by having it just fall off the cliff is a disappointment. The whole episode is somewhat necessary in the story of Robin and Starfire, although it's not really heavily brought up again until the movie. While the Beast Boy and Cyborg plot bring this episode way down, the whole plot revolving around multiple layers of misunderstanding is frustrating. The great backgrounds and occasional good dialogue keep this episode from being terrible. Episode 9, Overdrive. The Titans battle a thief who can duplicate himself. This episode is quite possibly the most bland and forgettable in the entire series. While other bad episodes might be hard to watch, you can at least remember them after watching. This episode also completely depends on Cyborg being part robot, just like pretty much every Cyborg episode, including the entire main arc of the last season. Into the actual episode, the montages, both of them, are a bit boring and very similar, but it is nice to see how Cyborg hangs out with the other Titans. It just goes downhill from here though. Cyborg becomes arguably unstoppable against Adonis with literally no downside. The fight itself isn't great, but it does show how incredibly powerful the new Cyborg is. Things only start to go downhill for him once he starts allotting power to the wrong places. Billy Numerous is a decent villain, although they did pick a great villain for Cyborg to not be able to simply outpower, but instead have to outthink. Unfortunately, because he is a villain you have to outthink, you don't really get any good fights against him. Some fights don't even get to start before they're over. Surprisingly, I found Beast Boy being the one to explain to Cyborg that sometimes you have to go slow to not be terrible. Obviously, it's not fantastic or anything, but they don't suddenly make Beast Boy into a genius, but they still have to make some semblance of sense. Also, the last fight is super clever. The choreography to only have one of each Titan do the fighting, but still have the effect of an army is fantastic. Although it does lack any incredible moments, and the ending is simply just a case of having to eventually end the fight. They never explain why Cyborg couldn't just get another processor but not a lot powered differently, but I guess they had to return to the status quo for the next episode. As I said in the beginning, this episode isn't hard to watch or anything, but it is incredibly bland. Episode 10, Mother May I. The Titans come under the spell of Mother May I, who only wants to take care of them, forever. This episode is incredibly strange, both strange as Teen Titans sometimes is, and strange in its placement. Being the last episode before the season finale, it does follow the trend of being one of the stranger of the season, yet it breaks some trends these episodes usually have, which I'll get to later. The beginning is just completely boring, the same joke over and over and over again. Mother AI treats our characters like children in contrast to their superhero selves, which is somewhat amusing the first time, but they continuously delve into the same joke. In general, I like the Hive versus Teen Titans Titans fights, like in Final Exam and Deception, and with 2 new members the fight could be even better, but instead the encounter is wasted on a joke. Some shots are cool, but the fight is completely one-sided and doesn't even properly end. Mother May I just comes in and finishes it. Starfire was the right choice of character to break out of her spell. I think her character lends itself best to the role that she plays in this episode, even if it does make the next episode look incredibly weird. Back to the actual episode, the fight against the gingerbread is pretty much the only fight in this episode that actually goes anywhere, so I guess it's the best one, but it's pretty short and simple. Most wacky episodes have a musical montage in them, and those are sometimes the best part of the episode. Yet here, while there is technically one of them, the song is a simple background track and is incredibly boring, while a painfully mediocre chase scene happens in the background. The way they defeat her via pie portal or something is unexplainably random, and they had been faking being hypnotized the entire episode, so doing it again at the end is just kind of boring. Obviously, knowing where the Hive live is also canon breaking, but who cares at this point? This episode is a disappointment. Compared to the other wacky episodes of the season, Mother May I makes Control Freak look like Slade. Another weak episode to finish the trilogy of subpar episodes in between the prophecy and the end. Episode 11, The End, Part 1. The end of the world has come. The Titans try to keep Raven from opening up the portal to release Trigon. One thing this episode immediately does is set the tone, not only just for this episode, but for the entire 3-part season finale. Despite the beginning having a relatively easygoing fight and Raven just hanging out with her friends, it's completely obvious this episode will end in tragedy from the beginning. One thing I don't like about the beginning of this episode is that they somehow do Raven hiding things from her teammates again. Each of the first 3 episodes of the arc start like this, and no one ever calls Raven out for it. That only lasts through the first fight and the scene after, though. Speaking of the first fight, it's pretty good. There are a few cool shots, like the ending with Raven just destroying plasmas from the inside, and the fake out with him in the middle was completely unexpected. The fight is exactly what it needs to do, as its entire point is to be unexpectedly normal. The next scene is fantastic, though. Seeing the entire sky suddenly turn black as all the Titans realize what's coming is tragic, and the sudden shift to a darker tone is done well. But after this scene, this episode starts to get a bit dicey. While some parts of this episode I really enjoy, and I'll get to that, the premise of the second half is incredibly awkward. Raven gives herself up for the stated reason that she doesn't want her friend's last day to be spent fighting. Now you learn in the next part that she actually had a plan to give power to her friends or something, but why she didn't tell them of this is seemingly only for suspense. Also, the Titans knowing that the world was ending and yet didn't put out a distress call or anything, but instead decided the 5 of them could handle a galaxy-conquering demon doesn't really make any sense either. But enough about nothing in the show making sense. The actual fight against the demons is weak. Although seeing Cyborg's huge attack finally charge up, only for Slade to just immediately recover, is fantastic. And seeing Beast Boy use his form from the Beast Within for 4 seconds was fun too. Raven belittling Slade and then Trigon taking his powers back is kind of satisfying to see the villain of the first 2 seasons be degraded to a pawn. While the actual opening of the portal was a bit drawn out and Trigon's introduction could have likely been more intimidating, the entire scene looks fantastic, and the Titans' reactions to watching Raven seemingly die are tragic as well. I'm kind of split on this episode, where there are many things that I like about it, from Raven and Slade's interaction to the great voice acting and writing for Raven. The general lack of context and some boring fights makes it hard for me to give this episode a score like the first 2 in the arc. Don't get me wrong though, it's still a great episode that sets up pretty well for the next one. Episode 12, The End, Part 2. Slade teams up with Robin to find Raven while the rest of the Titans distract Trigon. An incredible amount of things happen in this episode. It's crazy they managed to fit this much in only 22 minutes. The episode opens up with the Titans grouping up and discovering Raven's gift to them, her powers. The way they hype up the Trigon fight very purposely makes you believe they're going to defeat him, which is a very strange ploy to pull in the middle of part 2. Still, seeing all the other Titans using Raven's magic makes for a pretty neat and enjoyable scene, even if it leads to nothing. Obviously though, the highlight of the episode was Slade's involvement. While the circumstances are a bit strange, it all leads to Slade and Robin teaming up, and it's excellent. From the beginning of the series, they've always made it obvious how similar the 2 of them truly are. In doing this, they also made it so they fight in a similar way. This creates a fantastic few fight scenes. The choreography is perfect, showing how even if they are working together and they're not really helping the other one in fights. The reveal that Slade is just a skeleton is also interesting. At least they still show that he did indeed die. Back to the other Titans, their fight against themselves is interesting, but it does drag on for a bit too long. The Beast Boys fight is definitely the most interesting. Having them turn into different animals to counter what the other one just chose is incredibly clever and is executed well. Having each character bring up something to bother their counterpart was great too, especially the second mention of Terra in this episode. It's kind of strange that they wait to finish this fight before even getting to a good stopping point, but the episode ends as soon as Robin finds Raven, which itself is a slightly jarring scene and likely could have benefited from being given more time. This episode is an improvement from the last one. It has better action, better writing, and a more interesting plot. It perfectly picks up from the last episode and leaves the next episode ready to continue moving. From the Slade-Robin combo to the clever fight between Beast Boys, this episode is jam-packed with fantastic moments. Episode 13, The End, Part 3. Cyborg, Starfire, and Beast Boy fight Trigon to give Robin time to locate Raven. This episode has an incredibly long and out-of-order recap at the beginning. I wish they had some new animation or at least some more clever cuts in order to make it more interesting, but I guess in 2005 they didn't expect anyone to binge-watch the show. The idea to have the Titans decide to fight the copies of themselves instead of fighting their own copies actually allows the show to have another theme, the idea that friends can help you overcome your faults without having the show directly tell that to you or interrupting the main theme of the episode. The fight itself too is great. They're really able to show through great choreography how the Titans use their differences to take down the copies of their friends. The ending shot too with Trigon walking towards them is terrifying, and the Titans are completely stopped in their tracks and are forced to flee. Moving back to Robin and Child Raven, it's a fairly interesting idea. Some of the shots look great and it allows for the dynamics between Raven and Robin to develop further. Slade has a fight with a demon gatekeeper, and it's actually really fantastic. Because it's between two villains, both are actively trying to murder the other one. You can even see parts of Slade's skeleton. The ending of the fight is a bit bland, with Slade just blowing it up, but Slade's one-liner after killing him truly makes the fight incredibly well done for how short it truly is. Of course, Slade does come back once again after the Titans regroup, and he starts off the best fight scene of the episode. The show's choreography is truly at its best here. Each character is used fantastically, and the way they integrate team attacks makes the fight incredibly fun to watch. Raven coming back as White Raven and completely thrashing Trigon is done exceedingly well. Each hit just adds on to the last and makes the ending not feel like it just comes out of nowhere. The actual ending scene is great too. It recaps the theme of hope and also has a series finale feeling to it, which also makes sense as this was supposed to be the last episode. The entire episode was fantastic. Each fight has great choreography and the themes are executed perfectly, and it truly wraps up not just the season well, but also the series. The only downside to this episode is a poor position at least season 5 in. Still, a fantastic end to a fantastic season finale. Time for a season overview. Again, the show looks great and has good jokes. For the actual arc, this season goes back to being 5 episodes long instead of being only 4 or 3, and each one of these episodes is great. In general, the entire arc is incredibly dark, as Raven's arc should be, and the involvement of Slade, while it does feel a bit forced, is definitely worth it. This arc also happens to give us some great scenes that have been teased from the beginning of the series, like White Raven and Slade and Robin teaming up. And while some parts of the arc I wasn't the hugest fan of, like Raven hiding things from her friends pretty often, they more than make up for that. Trigon is actually kind of a bit boring, just being the stereotypical incarnation of evil, but Slade more than makes up for that, being arguably the best he's ever been. Also, while it is a bit strange, I thought having Raven being gone for a large part of the finale was likely for the best. Speaking of Raven, she makes for a fantastic main character for the arc. Using the theme of hope, they use her to show you can be whoever, not just who you were born to be. The lead up to the finale is the smoothest it's ever been, and getting to see places like Azarath was fantastic. This truly felt like the series finale type of arc, with the highest stakes pretty much imaginable. Through Raven being one of the most interesting characters, Slade being at his best, and Trigon being a great big bad, this is easily my favorite arc of the series. Unfortunately, the other 8 episodes can't quite live up to the spectacular main story arc. 2 of them are actually pretty good though. The Quest almost feels like a different series at times and has some fantastic fights. And episode 257494 is my favorite comedy-based episode of the series and is incredibly clever. Trock and Employee of the Month are both average, although in completely different ways. Unfortunately, this leaves 4 not so also great episodes. Cyborg the Barbarian and Stranded both can't decide how serious they want to be, and both struggled with repeated jokes or ideas. But the absolute worst of the bunch are Overdrive, which is one of the most forgettable episodes of the series, and Mother May I, which repeats the same jokes and has terrible fights. The non-plot episodes are not nearly as good as Season 2 or 3, and are closer to what Season 1 had. Despite this, the story arc episodes are so fantastic that I'm giving this season an 8, the highest of the 4 seasons so far. Well, that's about it. My least favorite episode was Overdrive, and my favorite was the end part 3. This has been AmpleSamuel, and I'll see you for Season 5. Thanks for watching.